So yeah, my name is Nicholas. I'm basically I'm a concept artist. I came to LA about like 6 or 7 years ago. And like I just do whatever like work like comes my way and whatever I find interesting. I work on stuff generally for like video games, movies, theme parks, all kinds of entertainment based things. Yeah, I've worked with Universal Studios a couple of times, a little bit with Disney and Jim Henson for some of their TV shows. I've also worked on a bunch of like pitch projects for animated films and TV shows. And lately, I worked on my first video game for something that's coming out on the next Xbox.
Oh, really, really cool.
Yeah, second indie game for
Second
the
indie game.
Xbox.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool. Have you always been a freelancer or have you worked in companies before?
I've done both. I started off when I first graduated. I worked I freelanced for a while, and then I also worked, and then like I transitioned to like a more full time position at a design studio in Pasadena, where I did like the bulk of my theme park work. So a lot of like projects for like Universal Studios and a bunch of like other parks around the world. I did mostly from that company as like a full time designer. And then like I think it was maybe like 6 months ago or something, I went back to like contracting again as like a freelancer. And yeah, I've been doing that since, kind of jumping here and there.
So what's it like being a freelancer in LA? Because it's a very vibrant scene there. Right? Is it tough? Is it full of opportunities, or is there a lot of competition?
Yeah, I would say it's like there's definitely like a lot of people like who freelance around here. Just like I guess we call it like contracting, kind of is like contract gigs that last from like 3 weeks to like a couple months usually. And that's a pretty common thing here. Like know a lot of people who do that. And there's competition and all, but a lot of it also depends on like the people you know, and like the more people you know, the more kind of more work you get, and I guess your portfolio at the same time. It is. I would think it's easier for us just because like, for example, for me, like it's easy to hire me as like a freelancer, and then like I can just drive down to the studio and work in house as a freelancer. Compared to like people overseas who want to freelance for like AAA studios here. They generally are much more picky with hiring people overseas because like for us, like they treat us like we are in-house designers. It's just that our contracts are shorter. So that's like a little advantage that we have. Yeah, but I think it's the same for anywhere. Like freelancers have like that kind of like, oh, I wonder if I got work the next month kind of like mentality. It's the same, like no matter where you are in the world, I think.
Yeah, but how do you cope with that? I mean, it's a reality, right? When you're kind of like running your own business, running your own show, and you've got to be looking for opportunities. Like, yeah, how do you deal with that?
A lot of it, it's luck. Like I don't really have like a game plan or like a secret formula to follow. Like sometimes like I know like certain months of the year I tend to get more work, so like I will like stock up and do like a couple gigs at a time. Sometimes like I was working like 3 or 4 like projects at the same time, and those will be like my terrible months. And then like I'll take like a couple months off when people are in like September or like December, like January, and that's when like people are working and I kind of just do my own thing. That's how I usually go about it. Also, just like learning how to like price yourself well, so that you take into account that like you're not going to have like stable work, so you make sure you charge more or like you charge accordingly. Makes it such that you can have some cushion in between the jobs if you cannot find work. Yeah, like the simplest advice I could give, I guess. Other than that, it's like luck, just same as everyone else, applying for work once in a while, hoping.
I'm just curious though. When you started out, did you see yourself being a freelancer, or did you stumble upon being a freelancer? Because everyone who graduates just wants a job, right? That's most people want to have that kind of security, wants that kind of that kind of opportunity offered by a company. But how do you stumble upon freelancing?
I guess I kind of fell into it. I remember when I first graduated, like, you know, we all did like the rounds of like, you know, like applying for like every company and studio. And like, or maybe like through the grad show, I had like a couple of like follow-ups from people who I met there. And like, I remember going to do all the interviews, right? And like for those jobs in like the first like month after graduation. And I think I just happened to pick the one that was a contract job for like 3 weeks. It was like a 3-week job. You know, I had a bunch of offers for like either like full-time jobs or like more longer term ones, but those jobs didn't sound as interesting to me. It's just it sounded much more like not what I want to do. So I happened to pick the one I want to do, and it happened to be freelance, I guess, or contract. And that's how I kind of set my path that way, I guess. But I've always been open to like a studio job. It's just that like studio jobs tend to be more, your work needs to look like their product kind of before they want to hire you like long term. And I think my work is a little bit more like I have a bit of everything. Like I do like animation, I do like live action, video games. So it's hard to pinpoint like what this guy's all about. So it's a bit harder, I think, to get like big jobs that way.
But what's it like, you know, moving between companies? Because like after working in, say, I mean, you've been contracted for a while in a couple of companies, and then all of a sudden you take on a new project and you have to adapt to a new style or a new way of working. How is it for you? Is it tough? Is it what are some of the strategies that you have to adapt, you know, to a new working environment?
That's part of the fun, you know. That's why you do it. You get to like work on different projects at the same time. I know, like for me at least, like the way I look at a lot of art these days, they kind of have like a rough, like what we call it, like a rough like breakdown of like, oh, I can see this kind of art is more like focused on like form, and like the edges are more like blend and like, you know, mix a brush, blah blah blah. And this kind of art is much more like focused on like texture and visual. Like you kind of have a way to break it down in your mind, like I think over time. And like it becomes like a systematic thing for me where like I look at the art and like, all right, now I know how I'm gonna do this, probably like 80% of it. And then the last 20% would be like on the day of like stressing out and like figuring out hopefully this works kind of thing. But you know, a lot of projects, especially the ones I work on in like the blue sky phase and like the early stages, don't generally have as like strict of like an art direction. It's kind of a bit more like what they would like to hire you to, because they want your like little take on like how their product is going to look like. So they don't really go like, oh, this doesn't look like our work kind of thing. I would assume in production it's going to be more like that. But like for me, I don't think I've ever encountered a situation where, oh, that was one time. But I almost never encountered a situation where like someone was like, hey, this doesn't look like our style of like, you know, whatever it is I'm working on. Usually they're pretty like open to whatever I bring to the table. Also in like a lot of like theme park work, which was initially what I was doing. Theme park style is like, you know, it's the Wild West. There's so many, like everyone's doing their own style kind of thing. Yeah, so it was pretty chill in that sense. I'd say like the big difference when it comes to like jumping around and a full-time job would be like you meet a lot of people for like a couple of weeks and then you never see them again. So, you know, you either have to get really good at like mixing into like different company cultures, because like even though you're freelancing here, you're mostly working in-house, at least the ones in LA. So like I'm always going to like different studios to work in their office at like a temporary table. So I'm always the temporary table guy. And like, you know, everyone in the studio already knows each other and you're like the new guy. So I'm like used to being the guy that doesn't know anyone in the studio kind of thing. So like, yeah, it's good to like be able to like mix into a group as quickly as you can. I think that's like a good skill to have. I think
it can be unsettling for some.
Yeah, it is unsettling, and I don't feel good at it. The first week is always like super stressful for me. The most difficult part is always the first day lunchtime, and you're always wondering like, okay, this is like a new town, new city for me. I don't even know what food there is in the area. Am I gonna be that guy again that I gotta approach a group of people going out for lunch together as friends? Can I join you? That kind of feeling. And like it's always like the most stressful part of the job is the first lunch. And like a lot of times I've learned that, like, in LA especially, like I remember when I first came over from Singapore, I was like not used to the fact that like a lot of people here eat alone. Cause like, in Singapore, right? Like you almost never like go out for lunch alone, even if you're like by yourself. You always like meet someone for lunch. But like when you come here, you look in like anything like restaurants and stuff, a lot of times you just see someone sitting alone. And it's like a normal thing. And like even though I've been here for a long time, like sometimes for me I would still feel it's a little strange. But like yeah, these days I think I kind of approach it with like, okay, I'm just gonna like do my own thing for like the first couple of days. And then eventually I'll know someone enough where I'll be like, hey, you wanna get lunch with me? And they usually say yes.
Right.
I work my way in slowly. Yeah. If not, some companies will be like, hey, come join us for lunch kind of thing. Then like I'm like, yes, I don't have to do this stupid like process that I do every time.
So your strategy is to infiltrate them, right? By just doing doing your work and then slowly creep
into their
in.
groups. Yeah. And it's awkward, but like you realize after a while, it's like you find it strange, but most people don't care. To them, is like, yeah, it's just another guy hanging out. Yeah, I remember there was one time I was my friend was like working at a studio, and like he recommended me for the gig, and I would join the gig, and I assumed I wouldn't have to go through this stupid process, right? And I was there on the first day, and he didn't ask me out for lunch. He went off on his own, and he was the only person I knew at the studio. I was like, oh man, I'm back to this again. But yeah, it's fine. It's not a big deal. It's like it's just a thing that everyone goes through. And like the older you get, I realize like they don't even care anymore. Like sometimes they hire like a bunch of us for a project, like, and like sometimes designers are in like their 40s or 50s, and by that point they've been doing this like bouncing around gigs thing for like decades now, and they totally don't care. They just kind of come in, they do their thing, they make small talk if someone approaches them, and then they go home. They have like their own lives and their own network of friends. They don't like they're not like me who like try to like get to know people in every studio anymore, because to them they've done this so long that like they know these friendships are very like temporary.
So they're very focused, right? They're really mission. It's like go in, do my stuff.
Yeah, they're just there to do the work. Not there to like make friends and network necessarily. And it's kind of like the approach to networking in general is like you don't want to like go in with the intention to network, right? Because then you come off as like that guy. So you just be yourself. I guess that's the best way I can to approach any of these things. And there are like studios that I remember like I just never clicked with the people there as well. And like we're friendly like on the surface, but like it never like became anything more. And it's fine. It's just a part of the thing.
Yeah. Well, I mean, working with so many different companies, and like you mentioned, you worked on pitch projects as well. Has there been any instance whereby a client goes like, "Hey, you know what? I want since you've worked with company XXX, can you produce work that's similar to the look of XXX plus a little bit of the look of the other company, and create something for me?"
For me, like years ago, it was like my first like, I guess not through a company, but for myself, like as a design, like an artist, like it was like the Jim Henson stuff, and they're famous for like back in the day, they are like movies with the puppets and stuff, like Dark Crystal and Labyrinth and things. And I worked with them on like some of their upcoming shows that's gonna be coming out this year. And like once you put down your resume, like people kind of associate you to that brand now. and like they'll know like, oh yeah, this guy's like one of those Jim Henson style artists, and you get like a lot of like people approaching you for the same look. And that's I guess that's also like one of the ways how like you get more work as a freelancer is you associate your name, your brand to like all these other companies that kind of represent your art. Yeah, and a lot of times they always go in thinking they want the same look as those companies, but like never generally. I don't think I've ever come across a case where like it actually is the same look, be it because like they think they want a look, but then they also make all these decisions that go against that look, so it doesn't come out to be that look, or like they mix so many different looks from things they like together, it just becomes like a mishmash of things, and it doesn't look like a thing. But that's fine. They don't really care, and I don't really care either. It's just like another thing that happens. Yeah, so it's not a big deal.
So you just kind of like just fulfill their request and
yeah,
you don't.
I've never been the guy that be like, no, you should do it this way. I always kind of, cause like you work with someone for 3 weeks, you're not gonna form a relationship that's strong enough where you'll be like, no, I strongly disagree. I truly believe that this is the direction your project that you have been working on for like years should take. As a guy who's only going to do this for like 2 weeks, I don't care. To me, it's like, yeah, if you want my like input on something, I give it. But if not, I'm the guy that I draw whatever I want. I'm the art monkey. I do whatever you ask me to do.
So you mentioned earlier, right, that you do what feels right for the art. So what feels right for you when you do it? What are your prerequisites, if any?
Usually for me, it's like the main two like distinction is always like what the project is, like stylistically, and like the idea of the project, and how much it pays. I guess obviously the way I usually structure it is like I kind of do like one for me, one for them, kind of like that's like my rule, which is like I do one that I think is like financially responsible, and maybe it's not as fun, but it pays very well. I'll be like, okay, I'll take this gig, and then when I'm doing this gig, if the next one, when I like looking for the next one, I tend to be like more okay. Now that I did one and I have like a couple months of like cushion for this like 1 month of job, I can like find one that I want to do more, and then I'll usually pick one, and those usually pay less, but they're more fun, or like it's a style I've always wanted to do, or like this is a style that I've always like wanted to try and I never got a chance. Now I get paid to try it, kind of thing. Or just like the idea for this game is super cool, and I was like, oh, I like the idea for it. Then I'll pick that one, and I'll like prioritize it over some of the other jobs that I get offered that aren't as fun. But also usually even if it's like 2 jobs or 3 jobs, you usually can like juggle between that if you work at night and like on weekends sometimes. So it's never been like hard for me to like go like, oh, I have too many options to pick from. It's never the case. It's usually like, okay, I'll spend my energy on like this to earn money, and then do some fun stuff on the side, and then I'll do some fun stuff for a while, and then I realize that okay, the next like I should start looking for like the next financial gig, I guess I can call it, and then I'll take that one, and then like usually I kind of go back and forth between the two.
So it sounds like there is a mix, right? You have like jobs that are there for the money, right? And jobs that they are not necessarily, they don't pay that much, but they are exciting to you for whatever reasons they are, and you try to find a balance between them, right?
Yep. And it's it could be any reason. Sometimes it's like some super random reason, like, oh yeah, these people look fun to work with, kind of thing. Then I'll just pick that one. Yeah.
I mean, you're so fluid, and like I said, you are able to just adjust so readily to things. What does flexibility mean to you, as?
Honestly, I've never really even thought about it until like we talked, and like you made me realize that like that I don't really have a game plan for my career, I guess. But I personally think that like the way I see it is like, you know, you can plan all you want. Like you can make all these like long-term plans and like work towards your goals, and it's still kind of out of your control in like a lot of ways, you know. So the way I see it is kind of like, you know, why worry about that so much? Kind of just focus on what you want to do and see where it leads you. And you know, usually, for more often than not, things tend to work out. I think like it's really rare to find yourself in a situation where like you want work, at least in LA, and you just cannot find work. There's so many types of work, and if you're just open to the idea of doing it, like, you know, there's a lot of opportunities that may lead in directions that you didn't think you want in the first place, but you end up enjoying, and you kind of find your niche in that sense. Like, you know, for me at least, I don't have a specific like goal in terms of like I want my art to look a certain way. You know, like when I'm working, sometimes it's like if my day job is very like realistic, live actiony, you know, my personal work I will do like, like super like stylistic animation, biz dev thing. And then my job becomes like biz dev thing. I'm like, you know, for my personal time now I want to do like, you know, video game style, so you know, whatever the thing is. So like it's always for me like balancing out. Like I don't want to just do one style the whole, because I find it difficult. I think I run out of like things in that look really quick. So I want to like have some distance from it, so I can come in from like an outsider's perspective again. So it works for me. Might not work for everyone. But like, yeah, that's all I can say about that.
So what do you think is the core of your kind of entire body of work?
I get brought on for a lot more like early phase where like it's about like, you know, they don't even have a script yet. Sometimes they just have like a log line, and like the producers will be like, they talk to you about what the project is, and then you'll be like, so what do you think? How do we sell this idea? And there's a lot of like, okay, I think like, you know, we flesh out like a couple of characters, and then like let's focus on like what scenes would sell your story in the most efficient way. Because you know, a lot of these things they don't have a lot of big budget for it yet. Obviously, it's a lot of self-funded stuff. So it's like, okay, I can only afford like a specific amount of art. How do we take this amount of art and make it the best sell for my idea as possible? And I'll work with them on the story and like finding the beats that like most like, you know, show what they're trying to tell. And like, you know, there are a lot of these like little tricks to like making the deck look appealing. And that's kind of like what I like to do, at least.
Right. But it sounds like you have some sort of niche, right? In the sense, you really enjoy building up rules. I mean, when things are still kind of like blue sky and things are uncertain, that's when things can be super open-minded, super open,
when
and
there's
you're
no
free to
rules,
play.
Yeah,
when there are no rules. So you're kind of like the rule breaker. You just want to be the one that does everything.
That's too cool. I don't know if I'll call myself the rule breaker. Just the guy.
Or maybe you are the one who builds the world that sets the rules.
Yeah. But you know, there's a downside to that. Like most of the times, you know, whatever art I do, the style that me and the producer end up coming up with, or like this, you know, it almost never, it never made it as into the final product. So like you never see your work translated to like, you know, whatever you see on the screen, which, you know, some people want to see what they did actually show up. You know, if not, it's like, what the hell? What's the point of any of this? Right. And like I want that too, but it's just it never works out that way unless like maybe they bring you back for like production, which would be nice. It's just I haven't worked long enough for that to happen yet. So if you want your work to show up on screen, you gotta get in later, I think.
Yeah, do more production. Then that way it would be definitely on screen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And also it's important to know, like when it comes to work, you have to don't fall in love with it. You know, it's not yours. It's ultimately it's their things, whatever you're working on. So like don't get too invested emotionally if it's not what you want it to be. Like that's like a big thing I learned early on, especially in a lot of these like pitch things where like they always sell it as, okay, this is gonna be our movie, as if like it's part of my movie. It's like it's not my movie at all. ever. Even if you like have a big like part in it, where like you change it to like now that is you change it to a point where like chunk of it kind of belongs to you. None of it belongs to you. You're just paid by the hour. You don't own any of it, and so you should not fall in love with it because things will always change, and you will always be disappointed, and just gotta just move on.
I think that's a very powerful way to frame this because sometimes there's this distinction. Right? Although I'm doing the artwork, but in the entire production, I do not own the entire production. The script owner or maybe the director or someone else owns the entire product. But
the guy that pays for it owns the thing. None of the creative people own anything.
Right, exactly. We're just part of a. That's why it's a production pipeline. It's just like we are kind of like the guys fitting in the bolts and nuts in a Toyota automobile, right? But we don't own the vehicle. Yeah, but because we invest so much into making the artwork good, there's this conclusion that hey, I own this piece, I made this significant contribution, therefore it's mine. But at the same time, it's not mine. It is mine in that sense. Yeah, I created it, but it doesn't belong to me. It belongs to someone else. And
I get it, because like there were times when I'm hired just paid by the hour to come up with ideas for stories for like IPs. So you feel like this is my IP because like this is my idea. I wrote it. I did the art for it. I came up with it purely 100% me. All the guy did was like he paid for it. And you would think like, okay, so since this is my idea, I came up with the whole thing. I drew the art for it. I even wrote the words for it. I came up with the name for the characters. I came up with the name for the story. I should have some say in this, right? And you realize, no, you have no say in this at all. They can arbitrarily change anything they want after you hand it over. And like, it's not yours. You can't do anything about it. So even if it's your idea, it's not yours, which is a little strange, but like, that's how it is.
So have you ever thought of creating your own product before? Whereby you can own the product?
Doing it right now. Because like, I have a bit of free time lately, I guess. So like, this is like the first time where I've decided like, okay, I'm going to try work on my own thing. It's not like it's not going to be like an IP for like a movie or a video game or whatever. It's like a much more self-contained thing. It'll be out at some point when I find the time to work on it. It'll be cool. It's a very different feeling when you're doing it for yourself because like like I said, there's like the sense of detachment when you're working with other people, and in a way it makes it easier as well for you because you're not as precious about anything, so like you throw away things way easier. So for me now, like I guess you kind of say like I'm on the other side of the table where like I'm thinking about, okay, I'm gonna have to hire animators, I'm gonna have to hire like I'm gonna have to pay for animators to animate like this specific character. If I draw him a certain way and he needs a rig, then I need to pay for a rigger, I need to pay for an animator. The animation is gonna cost me so much more because it's like a complex animation. And all these things start seeping into like the blue sky, like this dev part. And you cannot like be a separate artist working on your own thing. And now I start to like feel for the people I work with when I draw like a character with like 50 hands coming up. Somebody's gonna animate like 50 freaking hands. It's gonna take him weeks instead of like so like I get it. I get why it's difficult for them, the producers, at the same time. But yeah, it's fun. I recommend like everyone do this so they know what it's like working with stupid artists that wants like unrealistic things.
Because there are always constraints. So speaking of constraints, Power has another question. How do you discuss budget with them, I suppose, the clients? And what if the clients demand too much for the price that you offer?
Money stuff.
Yeah.
I feel like this is like another one of those essential skills you have to get good at. Like nobody wants to talk about money, but like it's like you got to take care of yourself, especially as a freelancer. So initially, I remember when I first started freelancing for the first time, when I stopped doing my full-time gig, my like job security gig, I would just take every job that came my way, and like I knew I was underpaid for like some of them, but like to me it was like it's this or $0 a month, and like yeah, you kind of over time realize that like this isn't going to work. I'm not seeing my friends. I don't even like this thing anymore. Like what am I even doing this for? Why did I join? I did art because it was supposed to be something I wanted to do, but I don't want to do it anymore because the pay sucks. And like especially once you start working, where like you know what it's like to get paid a certain amount of money for drawing. Going downwards is a very difficult thing that not a lot of people, like not everyone would be willing to do. Like so, you have to ask yourself if it's worth it. But anyways, like so, talking about money, you over time learn how to do this just because you have no choice. So like after a while, I started like learning to turn down work, and then you start to get, once you start turning down work, you start to project the energy of like, what, I have nothing to lose. It's like this isn't like I'm not desperate for the jobs, and when you come off that way, like I I feel at least clients would be much more willing to negotiate. When you give off the vibe that like, oh, he's gonna take it no matter how much I lowball him, you know, then it's hard for you to negotiate, to even like begin to negotiate. But when you go in with the mentality of like, it's fine if I don't take this project, I don't care, you know, now they are much more like, oh, why doesn't he want to do this? Now that he doesn't want it, I want him more now that he doesn't want me to do this with him. And then you start to have a bit more like say in like how you negotiate your prices. And it's also just breaking it down clearly for them. You know, you don't just throw out like a random number. Obviously, you want to like tell them what you're getting out of um, what they're getting for the money they paid for. So a lot of this pitch that, for example, they don't go by an hourly rate because it's generally too expensive for them. Because like sometimes you don't know how long it's going to take to draw this art, with all the changes and stuff. They tend to come in with a fixed rate. So like they'll be like, okay, we want this deck done for like an X amount of money. And like, you quote them a price for it, and it's like a decent amount of work. So it's like usually in like the tens of thousands of dollars maybe for like a whole deck. And they'll be always be like shocked. They'll be like, whoa, why is it like I thought it'd be a couple $1,000s max? Why is it like $13,000 or like whatever the price is, right? And then you'll be like, okay, let me break it down for you. Like, with this amount of money, you're gonna be essentially getting a document that you can bring to like a studio and show them, and they will understand the vision of your project. They'll know what it looks like. They can follow the emotional through line, whatever it is. They may even like the art enough that they'll be like, okay, we can even like use this art, whatever the case. You're getting all these out of like, instead you think you're getting one thing, but you're getting like 5 things instead. So you justify your price to them, and then they'll be much more open to like considering, and like, don't be afraid to throw a number you think feels right for you. Because like, maybe as an artist, you think it's intimidating to throw out like $13,000 for a project. But, if you break it down for yourself, like, and I'm sure you've done it before too, you realize it's not that much once you break it down to like living expenses, the months that you're going to spend on it, the hours you spend on it, all these things. Just don't be intimidated by the initial number. And then like the best thing I've heard, like, for when it comes to talking about money, is that the best situation that you can come out of it is if neither parties are happy with the amount we end up settling on, because it means that like I compromised and I didn't get the price that I asked for, but the client also compromised and he didn't get as low. The best outcome is when both parties are unsatisfied. When like one person's happy and the other person's not happy, regardless of which one it is, usually the working relationship will be a little bit strange, because like the client will be unhappy that he's paying so much, and you give him work and he's never going to be satisfied because he's like, I'm paying so much, or like you're getting paid so little, and like no matter what he asks you for a tiny thing, and you're like, oh, I'm not getting paid enough for this, man. This is bullshit. So like, yeah, that's what I mean by like both should be a little unhappy.
But I think you said a couple of points that are pretty interesting there, and I think I fully agree with you on that. Mainly, you communicated value, like in the pitch deck story that you gave, right? You communicated the client was asking, "Hey, what does this deck cost? You know, a 5-figure, right?" And you broke it down for him, like, "Hey, you know, it's not just a document, right? There's so many things that you can do with this document."
Yeah,
right?
It's not just pictures. Yeah.
Right. And if all these 5 things can help you get the project and get a project greenlit, you get more funding, right?
Exactly.
So aren't you willing to pay this amount to invest in that project? Isn't it worthwhile? Yeah. And that gets them to think again. So yeah, that's important. I think artists need to know the value of the services that they provide, because ultimately, if we factor in every single thing, right, our living expenses, maybe rental, internet bills, utility,
insurance,
whatever, insurance, right?
Health insurance. Yeah.
Exactly. So if we consider all these costs, then our pricing naturally should go up, because we got to take care of ourselves as freelancers or solopreneurs or business owners, whatever it is. So you have to be able to justify that, because each artist deserves that level of dignity, right? I deserve to have the client pay me for my basic insurance or my pay for my bills, right? Because otherwise, then what is the value of my art, or what's the value of the work that I'm doing?
Yeah. And this is like a thing that really like affects the industry you work in. So like, we talked a little bit before about how like LA and Singapore has like different like, industries when it comes to like entertainment. Like, and like, there's a lot of people talking about how like art is not like a very like sustainable career choice in Singapore. And like, I personally believe like for a difference to be made, the artists all have to stand up for themselves and like ask for a fair wage. Not ask for like an excessive amount of money. Just ask for a decent living wage so that you can live a proper life, not like starve and like eat and scrim and everything here and there. It's a job just like any other job, and for a change to be made, we are the ones that have to like set the initiative.
Yeah, exactly. It's taking ownership of your career, and that helps inform the kind of decisions that the artist would take. I would take, because if I'm in control, then that helps me shape my career. That helps me to determine who are the clients that I want to work with, who are the clients that I do not want to work, and that's important as well, because when an artist has the power to say no, that's actually very empowering, because he or she is no longer compelled to work just for money, because he or she can work based on what is good for their paycheck, and maybe it could be in their artistic interest or whatever. So it's important to take that power back and to
and it's also important that you are very objective about your own work. You need to know how much you're worth, and a lot of that comes down to like a couple points. For instance, like it's like one of those like old-fashioned taboo things to be like talking about money to your friends, even in the same studios and stuff. Like, but I'm a firm believer in like being open with the amount I'm getting paid within the studio with like people like the same level as me, and that's just a matter of like the only one who stands to gain from like everyone being secretive about how much they're being paid is the one that employs the one that hires everyone. Because he could lowball your friend, and if you know about it and you don't tell him, he's never gonna know. I don't stand to gain anything. I'm not getting the money that he gets lowballed. The guy that hires us is keeping the money. So like I'm a firm believer in like everyone should be open about talking about how much they're getting paid, and so that at least we have a basic understanding of like, okay, this studio is hiring around the price of like whatever, 40 an hour, 35 an hour, 50 an hour. So like when I make an offer to the studio, I don't go like, oh, $20 or whatever, thinking that assuming that's what everyone's getting paid. And like another thing would be like, being objective about your work makes it such that you know where you stand in the industry. So don't be intimidated. Don't think that just because you like, oh, I've only started working, this is the first year I've started working, I should only charge $30 an hour because it's my first year. You gotta think of your art as like a product with a certain amount of value. So naturally, if you think your art is good enough, even if this is your first job out of the gate, I've known people who like they are in school and like this is their first freelance gig. They have no idea how to even handle it. And I tell them like, okay, ask for $50 an hour. You can get this gig. And they do it and they get it. So like their first job right out of the gate, 50 USD an hour, that's a great first gig, So like think of your art not as something like how many years you've worked in like a traditional job, but think of it as like how good it is and how much it's worth to the people you're charging.
All right, man. Thank you so much for sharing with us. So really, thank you so much, because it's still really early in the morning for you. So I just want to thank you for coming to the show and just sharing with us, all the stuff that we've just discussed.
It's been fun.
1 hour. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.